Stop. Lift your face up and look at your life before you pretend this is not about you. You keep saving people who keeps choosing the same mistake, and every time you do, you quietly tell them you are beneath their consequences. You downgrade your position and absorb damage meant for them. Trying to save someone drowning looks noble, until you realize they will climb your body to breathe and drag you under without hesitation. Trying to pull someone out of a deep pit looks brave until they grab you by the throat and use you as a ladder, sending both of you down. This is how your help works in real life. You have seen this pattern before. At work, someone ignores clear instructions, misses the deadline, panics, then reaches for you to fix it. The partner who repeats the same behavior, apologizes perfectly, then does it again, expecting you to absorb the fallout. This is not confusion. This is selection. They chose the mistake. They chose the outcome. And the moment you interfere, you announce something dangerous about yourself. You exist to buffer consequences, not command respect. Not every mistake deserves distance, but every repeated mistake reveals intent. Most mistakes happen once. Chosen errors happen twice, 3 times, endlessly, because someone else keeps paying the price. That someone has been you. Pain creates memory. Advice creates noise. Psychology already settled this. Behavior only changes after consequences felt directly. Until then, behavior stays exactly where it is. That is why they never change. That is why your advice rots in the air. You keep telling yourself you are helping, but what you are really doing is absorbing consequences meant to correct them. You carry deadlines for coworkers who never learn. You carry emotional weight for partners who repeat the same betrayal. You carry consequences for friends who refuse discipline. And every time you intervene, you teach them a silent lesson. Your pain is cheaper than their growth. Machiavelli warned you without mercy. Men change only when necessity forces them. When you remove necessity, you remove leverage. When you save them, you teach them they do not need discipline, foresight, or restraint. They need you. Saving people does not make you noble. It exposes you as controllable. It places you beneath those who feel safe, failing, because you will catch them. You call it kindness. Reality calls it submission. This video will strip you of the instinct to rescue and replace it with something colder, something dangerous, something that restores hierarchy, control, and psychological distance. You lost the moment you confused help with power. By the end of this video, you will never rush to save anyone again, because you will understand something irreversible. Every time you block consequence, you volunteer to be controlled. Here is the reality most people avoid. When you save someone from a mistake they chose, you don't help them, you reposition yourself beneath them. Because power does not come from fixing outcomes. It comes from allowing consequences to teach. Watch how this plays out in real life. The person who keeps borrowing money and never changes their habits. The employee who ignores feedback and expects you to cover their failures. The friend who repeats the same self-sabotage and calls it bad luck. They are not unlucky. They are insulated by you. Every time you step in, you send a silent signal. Their choices carry no weight. Your energy exists to protect them from reality. That is not loyalty. That is submission. Machiavelli warned about this exact mistake. Not with morality, with structure. He understood that authority collapses when consequences are outsourced. A system survives only when actions have costs. Remove the cost, and behavior rots. This is why people keep repeating patterns you already warned them about. They are not stupid. They are comfortable. Comfort grows where consequences are delayed. And when you keep delaying them, you train people to lean on you instead of standing on their own. That is how resentment is born. You start feeling drained, irritated, quietly angry. Not because they failed, but because you carried something that was never yours. Here is the rule. If someone chooses a path after warnings, advice, and clarity, the outcome belongs to them, not you. The moment you accept their consequences, you lose leverage. You lose respect. You lose position. This is not about cruelty. This is about boundaries that preserve power. And once you understand this, you stop asking why people keep draining you. You already know the answer. Here is the shift you are not prepared for. The moment you stop saving people from mistakes they knowingly chose, the pressure does not disappear. It turns toward you because the system you supported begins to destabilize, and everyone involved instinctively looks for the pillar that used to hold it together. This is where most men fail without realizing it. Watch the reaction carefully. The person who depended on your intervention does not reflect. They escalate. They push urgency. They frame the situation as an emergency. They imply your silence is abandonment. This is not confusion. This is withdrawal. You removed insulation, and now they feel exposure. So they reach for the fastest way to restore comfort. Your reaction. Here is the trap. If you step in now, you confirm dependency. If you explain yourself now, you reassign authority back to them. If you justify your distance, you teach them how to pull you back next time. This is why silence matters most, after the pattern breaks, not before. Machiavelli understood this mechanism with precision. Men do not test limits when limits are enforced loudly. They test limits when restraint appears, and whoever moves first reveals weakness. By staying still, you force the system to correct itself without your interference. By reacting, you restore the old hierarchy where you absorb and they choose. Notice what happens internally during this phase. Discomfort spikes. Guilt surfaces. An urge to fix appears. That urge is not compassion. It is conditioning. You were trained to associate movement with responsibility and stillness with danger, even though stillness is the only position that returns ownership to where it belongs. This is why restraint feels unnatural at first. Not because it is wrong, because it threatens a role you occupied too long. Once consequences land without you cushioning them, one of two things happens. The person adapts, or the pattern collapses. Both outcomes restore order. Neither requires your sacrifice. This is where power quietly reasserts itself, not through confrontation, not through explanation, through absence of rescue. When you stop absorbing consequences, people are forced to negotiate with reality instead of negotiating with you. And the moment that happens, your position shifts upward automatically, because you are no longer a resource to be drained, you are a boundary that cannot be bypassed. This is the point of no return. Once you see how restraint restructures hierarchy, you cannot unsee how much power you handed away every time you confused intervention with strength. You tell yourself you are being humane, balanced, emotionally intelligent, but beneath that language sits a quieter motive you do not want to confront. The need to be perceived as good, dependable, indispensable, because being needed feels safer than being respected when you do not fully trust your position. This is where the weakness hides. You are not intervening because the situation demands it. You are intervening because your image does. You fear the silence that follows restraint, the gap where others might judge you as cold, detached, or selfish, so you move preemptively to protect perception rather than structure, and in doing so, you sacrifice leverage for approval. That trade always ends the same way. Once people learn your self-image requires you to step in, they stop managing themselves and start managing you, calibrating their apologies, timing their remorse, and performing accountability only long enough to trigger your intervention again. Nothing changes, because nothing has to. This is why repeated apologies feel hollow. This is why promises sound convincing but expire quickly. This is why behavior resets the moment pressure lifts. Machiavelli understood this failure precisely when he warned against mercy without limits, because mercy unbacked by consequence dissolves discipline. And when discipline dissolves, authority becomes cosmetic, visible, but ineffective. People stop responding to structure and start responding to loopholes. Look closely at the pattern you tolerated. They apologize after the damage. They promise change after the cost is absorbed. They repeat the behavior once stability returns. This is not emotional confusion. This is learned negotiation. You became the negotiable element in the system, the one who could be appealed to, softened, persuaded, worn down, and once someone learns outcomes are adjustable through you, they stop fearing the action itself. This is why words lose power when consequences are absent. Warnings without cost become background noise. Boundaries without enforcement become suggestions. Here is the rule that ends the illusion. Respect only forms where crossing a line carries weight, not emotional weight, not verbal weight, real weight. The moment you remove that weight, you remove the reason to self-regulate. And when self-regulation disappears, dependency takes its place. This is why powerful individuals are not endlessly available, not because they lack care, because they understand incentive structures. They help selectively. They intervene deliberately. They refuse to rescue people from decisions made with full awareness. They allow outcomes to burn lessons into memory, because experience imprints where explanation evaporates. And once you internalize this, your behavior changes automatically, because you no longer confuse compassion with interference, and you no longer mistake being needed for being in control. Ask yourself this without lying. Who are you constantly rescuing? Who do you keep bailing out emotionally, financially, socially, psychologically? Who keeps making the same choices, hearing the same warnings, and expecting the same safety net? And more importantly, what do you get from saving them? Because there is always a trade. Sometimes it's control. Sometimes it's relevance. Sometimes it's the illusion of being needed. Sometimes it's avoiding your own discomfort by focusing on theirs. But understand this: every time you step in, you delay the lesson. Every time you soften the landing, you weaken the impact. Every time you carry consequences that are not yours, you teach dependence. And dependence destroys respect. This is why Machiavelli warned that a leader who absorbs disorder instead of allowing correction eventually collapses under it. He knew systems rot when consequences are suspended. The same rule governs people. Those who never feel the weight of their decisions never develop judgment. Those who are constantly rescued never learn restraint. Those who are protected from reality never grow teeth. And eventually, they turn on the rescuer. Because deep down, they resent the mirror you hold up. They resent the reminder that they didn't earn their stability. They resent the silent truth that without you, they would fall. So they test you. They push boundaries. They demand more. They take more until you are drained. This is the final consequence of playing savior. You don't create loyalty. You create entitlement. The law is simple and unforgiving. You do not intervene in mistakes people chose with awareness. You do not interrupt consequences that are meant to teach. You do not steal reality's role and expect peace. You step back. You let the outcome land. You allow experience to do what advice never could. This is not cruelty. This is structure. And structure is what separates power from exhaustion. The moment you stop rescuing, something changes. People either rise or they disappear. Both outcomes are correct. That is Machiavelli's law of consequences. And once you respect it, you stop being dragged into other people's chaos. You stop absorbing damage that was never yours. You stop confusing mercy with weakness. You become someone reality works with, not against. And from that point forward, you are no longer the one being drained. You are the one who cannot be burdened. Now understand what really happens the moment you stop interfering. Silence creates pressure, absence creates friction, and friction forces truth to surface. When you no longer save people, they are forced to face themselves without an exit. No buffer, no soft landing, no one to blame. This is where power actually shifts. Some people will panic. They will escalate. They will accuse you of changing, becoming cold, becoming selfish. That reaction is the proof. They were never attached to you. They were attached to the protection you provided. Machiavelli understood this mechanism perfectly. He knew that dependence masquerades as loyalty until pressure removes the safety net. Only then does reality reveal intent. When you stop absorbing consequences, something else happens. Your presence gains weight. Your words become scarce. Your approval becomes rare. Your attention stops being automatic. And scarcity is not cruelty. Scarcity is structure. People begin to calculate around you, instead of leaning on you. They think before acting because they know you will not clean up the damage. They hesitate because the cost is real now. This is how authority forms without force. You don't lecture. You don't threaten. You don't explain. You let reality speak. And reality is far harsher than anything you could say. Most people will never thank you for this, because growth feels like loss before it feels like strength. But the ones who survive it will respect you permanently. And the ones who don't were never meant to remain. This is the final separation. Rescuers stay entangled forever. Leaders step back and let the system correct itself. Once you internalize this law, your life simplifies. You stop being drained. You stop being needed for the wrong reasons. You stop carrying weight that doesn't belong to you. You become someone others must stand on their own around. And that is the quietest, cleanest form of power there is. Not domination, not control. Irrelevance to other people's chaos. That is Machiavelli's law, applied correctly. And once you obey it, your energy stops leaking. You are no longer pulled downward by other people's choices. You stand where consequences end. Once you understand this law, you stop arguing with reality. You stop rescuing people who are determined to repeat the same mistakes. You stop confusing compassion with obligation. You recognize a hard truth most people never accept. Some lessons only arrive through loss. Some growth only comes through consequence. And the moment you interfere, you interrupt the only force strong enough to change them. Machiavelli never believed power-giving was noble. He believed power misplaced was dangerous. Because when you remove consequences, you don't save people. You train them to depend on you while resenting you at the same time. This is why rescuers are rarely respected. They are drained, blamed, and eventually discarded. The man who lets consequence stand is different. He is not cruel. He is clear. He understands boundaries are not walls. They are filters, and only those capable of standing on their own are allowed close. If this made you uncomfortable, that's the point. Discomfort is the signal that a boundary needs to be rebuilt. If this clarified something you've been feeling but couldn't articulate, acknowledge it. Drop this in the comments to lock it in. I don't absorb other people's consequences. And if you want more content like this, not motivation, not comfort, but rules that actually change how power works in real life, subscribe to the channel. This is where we dismantle the habits that drain you and replace them with structure, restraint, and authority. Share this with someone who keeps saving everyone and wonders why they're exhausted. Sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is step back and let reality do its job. That is the law. Live by it, and your energy stops leaking. You do not need to control anyone. You only need to stop carrying what was never yours